baby boomers,
I used to be with it.
millennials,
Okay, boomer.
Generation X,
What's going on?
and Gen Z. What do they have in common? Not a lot, it turns out. But one thing they can agree on is that this is the political podcast they want to listen to. Welcome to Not My Generation, the political podcast that looks at political events, news, and happenings across the world and at home through a generational lens. Your hosts are Dr. Emily Stacy and Professor James Davenport, two political scientists from Rose State College. But the views expressed on this program are solely the views of the host and their guests and do not reflect the views of Rose State College, its administration, faculty, or students. Coming up on today's program.
If you're not a registered voter, I don't care what you think. If you don't care enough to register to vote, I don't care what you think.
We don't need to empower you any further.
But, you know, one of the things that I think's changed pretty dramatically and why Trump tends to overperform on national polls is a lot of folks use educational attainment level as part of their model. And that gap of participation, Trump has broken into that, where it's, the advantage for college-educated turnout over those without a college degree has not been as wide. I would probably buy stock in negative firms that produce negative advertising as much money as they're going to have in this race.
And now, here are James and Emily. Good morning, Emily.
Good morning, James. How are you?
I am all right. I found out this week I'm going to be having knee surgery.
Oh, dear.
Over spring break.
So
that's going to be my spring break is having my knee cut up on. So
you're going to hobble around for like how many, 6 weeks, 8 weeks?
They said the recovery should be pretty quickly. It's not like I'm having a knee replaced.
Are you going to get one of those like wheelie things where come on, Dad. I want you to roll around for a state.
I want something that's got a little bit of power to it and I can zip around.
No, we don't need to empower you any further at all.
But you just had an op-ed come out.
Oh,
is that right?
Indeed, I did. It's my first co-authored piece. I don't play well with others, but I needed somebody to legitimize me because I do not have an expertise in the law. Right. And so I partnered with, I wrangled in Dr. Christine Pappas at ECU to kind of put some legitimacy behind an inquiry at the number of cases that have been on this before the Supreme Court on this 24-25 docket. Relating to Oklahoma or with Oklahoma on right as part of the case. And so it's I think it's a really interesting examination in us kind of airing our dirty laundry, our political laundry, if you will, at the Supreme Court level. Very interesting analysis. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of this one.
And if people want to go read that, they can go to
oklahomavoice.org. I'm sorry. Yeah, is it? I don't know. Oh, Lord.
Oklahoma, Google Oklahoma Voice and you'll find it.
We're doing poorly this morning.
Well, we have a great guest in the studio with us today in the luxurious, fabulous, awesome Possibilities Inc. studio that we record these in. And that guest is Pat McFerron. He is a founding partner at CMA Strategies and the president of Cole, Hargrave, and Snodgrass. He is nationally known for his polling and focus group work for corporations and political campaigns, and he's been relied upon by both startups and Fortune 500 companies for his marketing expertise.
He's kind of the godfather of Oklahoma data and political data, man.
He is also a William Randolph Hearst Scholar who graduated summa cum laude from Oklahoma City University.
Nice.
Awesome. A place that you are teaching at right now.
I go there at 12:30.
And we are just very excited to have you with us today. We're going to be talking about a recent Sooner survey that Pat sent out in the field and got results back and has reported some of those. So we're going to talk about those. Before we get to that, we have some icebreaker questions for you that we ask every guest.
Yes, this is your first time.
It is. It is. I'm excited to be here. I'm now a little scared.
That's okay.
First question, maybe easy enough, maybe not be. It depends on how you think about it. But are you a millennial, Gen Xer, Gen Zer, or baby?
No, Gen X. There's no doubt.
There we go.
Right.
Right in the heart of it.
Right in the heart.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I guess you guys are very similarly like Steve Jobs, the black, black turtlenecky kind of focused situations.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right,
fair enough.
Yes. So Gen X, there aren't enough of those.
I don't have my icebreaker questions. I was a bad podcaster this morning. What are you currently reading, watching, or listening to?
I just finished Going Infinite, the Michael Lewis book about Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX, and so that's it. So I'm actually getting ready to start something. I've actually been trying to wade through the latest Winston Churchill biography, but I think it's 15,000 pages or something. I'm not even much past the Boer War yet. So, but that's a wade. But anything by Michael Lewis is really what I'm working on right now.
What is your favorite social media platform?
Oh, that's almost like asking what your favorite snake is, I think. But X or Twitter is where I spend most of my time.
And do you find it useful in your field?
I do. I do. I mean, I'm not. It's probably a mix between work and
Sure.
just
Same.
voyeurism, I guess, for a little bit there.
Sure.
So.
Very good. What is your favorite pastime or hobby?
Oh, baseball.
Nice.
I'm a baseball and prefer to listen to it on the radio or go do that. So that's probably what that is. So.
Okay. What is one event in your lifetime that has had the most impact on your personal political views?
On my personal, I can point to exactly when it was. It would have been in about 1982 or so when I'm 13 or 14 years old. And I knew what my folks were doing and working, working their fingers to the bone. And there was a union strike, and saw someone on the Today Show talking about how if we can't work for $36 an hour, we don't want to work. And it made me really understand unions and everything else like that. And that's an interesting. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that before, but it's one that sticks out in my mind very, very starkly.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's jump in and talk about your most recent Sooner survey, which was a kind of a early look at the 2026 gubernatorial race here in Oklahoma. And before we get to that, just some basics about polling, if you don't mind. So tell us about the process of polling. What are the methods that you use to try to contact people to get them to respond to your surveys? How do you identify those respondents? And, how do you determine an appropriate sample size?
The key thing about polling is making sure that everybody in your universe has an equal opportunity to participate. And so I actually I've got a voter file for actually the entire nation, really. And for example, in Oklahoma, I've got about 88% mobile phone match rates now for folks. And so we try to give everybody 6 to 7 opportunities to answer, either via text or live agents, is how we do it. And there are some others that do panels and things like that. And it bugs me when you get professional kind of survey takers.
Yeah.
And so we go back to the random base file anytime we draw something. And right now, it depends on the audience, like at Metro Oklahoma City or Metro Tulsa, our age will be down lower, so we'll let our text go up a little bit. But generally on a statewide now, we're about 25% text to web, and then the rest live calls. And it's the biggest challenge is getting those response rates where you need them to be. And so we actually have our own data collection center located in Moore. Pitch, if someone wants a great part-time job, let me know. And we've got about 65 employees down there, and we train them in data collection. There's much difference on the first part of a phone call between sales and data collection. And we think we do it very well, but it is what keeps me up at night. I mean, people don't like to answer their phone from strangers. It's changing dramatically. One of the things we do constant studies on our polling to look at things, and our answer rate. I would tell you when I started in the mid '90s, about 70% of the people that answered the phone were women, and you couldn't hardly ever get men to do it. Okay. And you had to cut through the phone, through the woman, to the spouse as the gatekeeper, the wife as the gatekeeper to get male responses. And that's eroded now. That's not the case anymore. In fact, it's tougher to get women to answer the phone than it is men these days. So just odd things like that. But we have to always guard that. I think taking another step back, what I think really matters, what sets us apart from some other pollsters, is how we define our quotas or universe and who we're going to talk to. We create a model based on past performance. We use age, gender, party affiliation, and geographic regions, kind of 4 areas that are stabilized. But we let our survey itself change that model. So if we have an election coming up and we're finding out, for example, in 2022, it wasn't everywhere, but in a lot of places, we had a much higher desire to participate among women as they were coming off the Dobbs decision. And so instead of doing a traditional like 48, 52, we would get some of our surveys up to 54% female turnout. I think other pollsters, and I think, don't let their model be changed by what they're actually hearing. And, if you want to talk about, might be getting ahead of some of the questions here, but, one of the things that I think has changed pretty dramatically and why Trump tends to overperform on national polls is a lot of folks use educational attainment level as part of their model. And that gap of participation, Trump has broken into that, where it's, the advantage for college-educated turnout over those without a college degree has not been as wide. And I think the pollsters have missed that. And that's caused, it's not a huge miss, still probably margin of error, but I think that's one of the things that's been very different there.
Well, when you look at the margins of victory, small changes can mean...
Right. When you're as
right?
Yeah, we're a divided country. And so you can be off 2 points and that flips it,
Now, you used the term universe a couple of times. So help some of our listeners, if they're not quite familiar with that. What are we talking about there when you talk about the universe that you're...
Well, what I care about are people who are voters.
Okay.
For the most, not everything, but for a political campaign, if you're not a registered voter, I don't care what you think. If you don't care enough to register to vote, I don't care what you think.
I tell my students that all the time, right?
Yeah. And so the universe are those that are eligible to vote, and then you can put some other parameters on there at times. If it's going to be, a presidential election, I do not put any other parameters on it other than being eligible to go vote. Okay. Registered and eligible. But if it's a primary election or a municipal type elections, I probably want to put some vote history and past participation on there for at least some of that, or at least limit our new participants there, because we know that's just not factual that there are going to be that many new people turn out to vote. If you're over 60 years old today and you've never voted in a mayor's race, you're probably never going to. Yeah. Now, we'll do some things there. If you're 25 and you just bought a house, yeah, maybe you do. Right. So,
right. I was interested.
Not that many 25-year-olds are buying houses right now, but.
Not many 40-year-olds either, anyway. I was interested at the shift that you noted between women and men answering, just kind of to go back to that really quickly. And you noted it was kind of in the 90s, and I wonder, just kind of sociologically, was that maybe because women were home more?
Yeah, I think in the 90s, especially before cell phones were pervasive, they were the ones closest to the phone in the house.
Yeah, okay. Just really interesting. I would love to do more studying on that. Anyway, moving on. I'm a nerd. So what are some of the challenges of polling firms that you are dealing with? Again, you kind of mentioned the reluctancy of people, but how do you kind of break through that?
Well, and once you convince people that you're not a scam, that you're not selling something, it's our response rate. If you look at after you have someone on the phone for 10 seconds, is as good as it's ever been. It's just cutting through that first 10 seconds and getting them to answer the phone. Yeah. It's actually kind of interesting. We track our response rates and everything. And anytime they crack down on, robocalls or spam calls or things like that, it actually helps us. Really? Yeah, because people get a little, if they aren't getting the auto warranty call or everything every single day, they're more likely to answer the call. It's what keeps me awake at night. And I worry every election cycle, is it going to work one more time? But it always seems to work. So,
I think, I've read in different places the concern that there's polling fatigue and voters are more highly resistant. And the question emerges is, are the people who will actually answer the phone, are they actually reflective of the broader population? And it seems they still are, but it just seems like it's a lot harder to get to that point.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we used to. I mean, it's the number of folks we have to start with now is a lot larger number than we used to, but it does still seem to be very reflective of who participates.
Okay. Well, I mean, this leads to our next question, which is, polling firms seem to have gotten a bad rap over the last few election cycles, especially national pollsters. Where do you think some of that criticism is fair, and where is it not so fair?
Well, I mean, there's really not much of a national poll. I mean, it's really about electoral college and different places there. But I generally tend to say, a poll is worth what you pay for it. And so the free polls that are out there are worth about that. And so you have to know who's paying for a poll, where things are going, different issues there. And I'm happy to always talk about that with any of our polling. It's I will tell you, I think the private polls that the political campaigns have been more accurate than the national polls. Yeah. I like to use the 2016 election season as an example. That's one where I think they first started saying there was a big problem. Yeah. But the Clinton campaign canceled fireworks. The Clinton campaign was in Minnesota the weekend before. I had friends telling me it was down to 3 counties in Pennsylvania that were very close on the Trump campaign. They all knew that it was going to be razor thin close and knew that Trump had a chance, or you wouldn't have seen those things kind of happen.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So,
and I will point out that polls are a snapshot in time. Things change. Right. And as we've continued to, we used to, have a 24-hour news cycle. And what do you think, 7 minutes now?
Yeah,
I mean, it's what we're talking about now might be irrelevant already. Right. But it's, it means that lifespan of that snapshot's even shorter than it ever has been. Yeah. And so by the time you get out of the field, you get it out, you get it in the public stream and it's circulated and everything, it can already be late. I can use the 2024 governor's race in Oklahoma as an example. I will tell you, 10 days out, Joey Hoffmeister had a real shot to win. And we saw it even, I think it was the Wednesday or Thursday before the election, and we ended up just to learn more about polling in this day and age. We went and pulled it all the way through Monday night, and our Monday night poll was exactly on where the Tuesday morning was, where the Tuesday results were. But it just, over that weekend, it moved dramatically. There was a reason for that with a late ad, but it moves very, very quickly. But if you've been a traditional pollster and quit on that Thursday thinking things aren't going to change, that's just not the case anymore.
Right.
I was going to say, is part of the misunderstanding that the public, the general public, the people who are not as familiar with the intricacies of polling and the fast pace of how things change and how that can influence health, is part of that what leads them to think of polls as more predictive tools than they actually are in some cases, is because they just don't understand, a poll done a month out, things can change, and you shouldn't automatically assume that that's going to tell you, well, this is how the election's going to play out.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think in Oklahoma here, I actually think that there ought to be some professional courtesy between pollsters and meteorologists. and in Oklahoma, we understand that a 10-day forecast doesn't mean that's what's going to happen in 10 days. Right. And polling's much the same way. The closer you are to it, the more likely it is to be able to do that. But things change, patterns change. And especially in primary elections, things change pretty dramatically, at least in Oklahoma. Nationally, we're so divided that it can happen in general elections, but especially in primaries, things can move very, very quickly.
So do we want to move to the most recent Sooner survey?
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So you did a survey over potential gubernatorial candidates in 2026. So who were the candidates or potentials included, and why were those individuals included? What questions were you trying to answer with this survey?
Well, I've had there has been some legitimate criticism about who I included in the survey, and I'll be upfront with that. The reality is I have had 3 people tell me to my face they're running, in McCall, Drummond, and Chip Keating. And So we tested the three of those and tested them there. I know that former Senator Mike Mazzei has a logo out. I know that Matt Pinnell has not, Lieutenant Governor Matt Pinnell has not said he's not running, but he's not said he's running either. And so I wanted to see where it was if the field was with those three. Yeah. And then it's difficult to fathom a more polarizing figure right now than Ryan Walters, State Superintendent of Schools. And so with his name being rumored there, he was the one that I thought could fundamentally change the dynamic of the race. And so I wanted to test him as well. So those are the ones that I tested.
Okay. And it's hard, and we'll talk about this later on, but it's hard to, absent just, like you said, direct communication that said, I'm running, or just the way a candidate presents themselves, it's pretty clear they're going to, it's kind of hard to assume who might jump in. I mean, it's an open seat. I'm going to assume there's going to be a lot of candidates who might want to take a shot. So I would think this far out, any list that you use,
this won't apply to the lieutenant governor, but the others in the list, I just don't think they have much name identification at all right now. But you do have Chip Keating, who's from a very famous family in the state, and so you wonder if that is connected there and resonates with voters. And then Speaker McCall, Charles McCall, having been Speaker for as long as he was, you wanted to see where that was. So that gave them some, not necessarily credibility in the governor's. I mean, I think it does, but I'm not testing that. I'm testing where are they with the voters? Does it really resonate there?
Well, let's look at some of those numbers, the favorable and unfavorable numbers for the candidates that you included. First of all, why is that favorable and unfavorable? Why are those important to consider, right? And then how closely connected is that to a candidate winning an election? How closely related is favorable, unfavorable to actually winning the election?
Well, I think you generally, at least we hope in politics that you vote for someone you like. We know that's not always the case, but you either vote for someone you like or someone you don't like. So that's why we like to look at the favorability. We see it as a little bit of a guide into where your ceiling can be, where your floor is, and what sort of definition you have. Without that favorability, being able to look at it, sometimes the ballot test, especially this early on, is just a reflection of name identification. Oh, that's the name I've heard the most of. And there's still an element there of that, but by asking the favorable rating, we can say, okay, are these people that also like this person, or they just heard the name? And so it gives us some of that, and it tells you how staunch is someone's positioning. And so we always ask actually, not just favorable and unfavorable, but strongly or somewhat, to what degree. And once someone has moved to that strongly favorable or strongly unfavorable category, it's very seldom that someone changes their mind about that person.
Yeah. So did any of these candidates stand out for high favorability or low? What can we take away?
Yeah, I mean the two best known candidates we looked at were Attorney General Gentner Drummond and State Superintendent Ryan Walters. I do want to point out that even though I'm using the titles here, in our survey we did not use those. We just used their names. So it was just Gentner Drummond and Ryan Walters. I will say I do think there's an advantage that Drummond has naturally. One, it's a pretty famous name in parts of the state. And there aren't a lot of Gentners out there, and so it's memorable. And he has been obviously a presence, and my guess has had more column inches and more time on TV than most other statewide office holders. And so we have among Republicans, is all I'm looking at here, 48% favorable rating, 13% unfavorable, and 21-5 at the extreme. So a 4-to-1 ratio there. So very solid numbers for someone this far out of a gubernatorial election and for a secondary office holder. Walters is almost as well known. 81% said they knew the name. He was a 31 favorable, 36 unfavorable. I actually have another poll out that I've just finished that has him at a 30 to 37. So very similar among Republicans here. So that's two polls in a row that I have him where he is negative among Republicans.
That would seem to be a rough place to start from. It's one thing if a candidate doesn't have high name ID, but when they have fairly high name ID and they're already underwater with voters of their party, at least as regard to their perception of them, how do they overcome that?
Well, you do that by changing the universe. We've talked about the universe before. And so and this is one of the interesting things I think in Oklahoma is we really are largely a one-party state.
Right.
I think whoever wins this Republican primary nomination is going to be the prohibitive favorite in the general.
Yeah.
And we know that primary turnout's very low. In fact, it's not unusual. I mean, I'll use a state Senate race, for example. State Senate races, state Senate represents roughly 90,000 individuals, just a little less than that. A lot of them can't register to vote, or they don't register the party. But if you get 3,000 votes in a Republican primary for Senate, you're probably going to win that seat. So you do the math, that's 3 to 4% of the people. Right. And so you don't have to appeal to a whole lot to win that nomination. And Walters does have those that are very strong advocates. So I think he has a pretty substantial floor. I'm not sure his ceiling's enough to ever get him there, but he does have a floor. He's a viable candidate if he can raise the money to compete.
Okay, all right. Well, in addition to the favorable and unfavorables, you also asked a ballot question, right? A couple of different variations of it. And one included Walters, one didn't, as we mentioned earlier. So what were the results of that? And was anybody kind of standing out amongst the group this early on again in how people were? I think the question you asked was if you were to vote today or something along those lines.
Yeah, if the Republican primary election for governor were held today,
right,
who would you vote for? The candidates were. And with the McCall, Drummond, and Keating, Drummond's at the top at 50%, and the other two each at 7%. Just an incredibly strong number. Now, things change. I want to point out in the newsletter I sent out, sharing this, I pointed out that if you go back to before 2018, one of the first surveys I did there, we had Todd Lamb, Mick Cornett, Dan Fisher, Gary Richardson, and Kevin Stitt. And Kevin Stitt was at 1%.
Right.
But what's interesting about that is Cornett was at 29, which is what he ended up getting. Lamb was at 22, ended up getting to 24, and then Stitt got to 24. So nobody's vote total really came down. Gary Richardson, I take that back, his did, and Dan Fisher picked that up. But so it's I think it's going to be tough for the Drummond number to come down too much further here.
I was going to say nobody in that group had such a wide margin out at that starting up with, right? Yeah.
Right. And so it's different. I mean, when you looked at it in 2018, there were still coalitions to be built to get to that 50% in a two-way race. In this one, they're going to have to tear Drummond down.
I was going to say, should I be expecting some negative ads?
I would probably buy stock in negative firms that produce negative advertising as much money as they're going to have in this race.
So I'm looking at these numbers. Should these other folks just pack it in to call it and say, look,
it's way too early. And I think all these people have legitimate things they want to move forward, different policy initiatives they have. And I don't think this race is over by a long shot.
Yeah.
I think they can make up some ground and change this dynamic here.
Yeah.
And I'm always a guy for elections, and not just because that's how I make my money.
So is there anybody else? We've mentioned, obviously, Ryan Walters and Mazie and Pinnell. Anybody else you see getting into the race?
Oh, there are a few other people that will get in the race, but not. I don't know that I've seen any other names that any of our listeners would probably be familiar with.
Okay. Yeah.
It certainly could happen. It's not unusual. I wouldn't be surprised to see some single issue candidates maybe get in the race, kind of like Dan Fisher did in 2018. That maybe abortion is their only issue, or maybe you see it sometimes a gun rights person or something like that. That's not necessarily trying to. I mean, they would love to win, but they're really pushing an agenda as much as anything else. Right. So I think that's what I would look for. I think everybody's in the era of Trump. Instead, everybody looks for who's the rich guy that's going to come into the race and win. I feel we already have at least two or three of those already covered here. They just two of them have happened to have political office before. So.
Right. And it's hard to predict that too, right? I mean, Stitt really did come at least to the average voter or whatnot, come out of nowhere and kind of emerge through that.
Right.
That
And I want to point
process.
out that it wasn't, he got 24% in that first round. I mean, it's not that he won it straight up.
Yeah. All right. So we've been talking about Republican candidates, and we know that it's, as you mentioned, probably very likely that whoever wins the Republican primary is probably going to be the odds-on favorite to win the governor's race. But I have to think the Democrats are going to run somebody. So who in your mind right now kind of stands out?
There are a few names out there that look at things. And what I think you'll do, and one thing we didn't talk about in the primary there, I'll go back a little bit because I think it's relevant to this discussion, is when we throw Ryan Walters in, Drummond does get down below 50. He pulls him down to 44.
Okay.
Ryan Walters jumps in at 14, and Keating and McCall both drop down just a point or two. So it's not as high of a floor as I think most people thought Walters would have. But I don't know how this fight with Stitt and everything else is going to change things here. But if I were a Democrat, I would say, look, if Ryan Walters is the nominee, we need someone that's a break glass in case of emergency type of candidate. Because I do think that he is the only candidate that could potentially lose a November election. I think the others are all pretty solid shoe-ins. Right now, given where their favorable rating is. And we saw with Stitt against Hoffmeister, those Republicans tend to want to come back home. Mm-hmm. But the Ryan Walters, among Republicans being upside down, while he can change the universe in the primary, I'm not sure he can in the general election. And those folks come back home. So I've heard Cindy Munson's name mentioned. I would think that Monroe Nichols, who just won the big race in Tulsa, he's probably one of the top tier Democrats at this time. I've heard, the Cherokee chief, Chuck Hoskin Jr.'s name's mentioned. But I have no insight. This is just some random guy here pontificating with a nice microphone in front of my face.
Well, you have a little bit of insight.
Right.
Yeah. Not on the Democrat primary side. I really don't.
Any possibility that we'll see another kind of Republican switch and run kind of a disaffected Republican?
I don't think so. I mean, you could have. It might be more likely for them to switch and run as an independent, kind of like Gary Richardson did against Steve Largent. But I don't think that matters that much in Oklahoma anymore because the generic Republican advantage is 23, 24 points. Our current model, we have 59% of the voters turning out being Republican now for this election. And it's hard to lose a race to 50 when you start at 59.
Right, no doubt.
It makes a difference, right? Yeah.
We've got a little bit of time, so I want to deviate and just ask you about dark money. So Kevin Stitt has been running as a term-limited governor. Dark money ads, right, on his tax plan, encouraging citizens of Oklahoma to contact their legislators to support his, half and a path, right? Half and a path plan, which I think is a hell of a good marketing scheme. It's just interesting. I think I don't know that I've seen this sort of use of dark money to promote a sitting governor's plan. I don't know. In recent memory, I can't remember.
Well, it's always interesting to me, the term dark money and different things there. I mean, it's if you like it, it's hard to say, oh, that's dark money. It's still secret. It's still secret money. It's still secret money. But no, hey, this happens all the time. You talk about the 2018 effort to raise taxes with Step Up. There was a lot of money there spent on that side. I don't think anybody would have concerns about groups trying to raise tobacco tax or something like this, some other issues, different things. So it's just what happens in politics, and it's what moves forward. But what is interesting to me as you're talking there is he's in his last 2 years and really wanting to have that signature accomplishment to hang things on, and there is a competitiveness issue to the income tax. When you look at growing states, there are ones that tend to have lower ones. But one of the challenges we have in Oklahoma, and I've done some polling on this, and back Scott Carter at the Oklahoman just did an article on it. When you ask Republicans and all voters, do you want a tax cut or not? The answer is yes. But if you ask people, do you want a tax cut or investment in roads and bridges or education? That's a different question. It's kind of like me. Do you want a cheesecake or do you want to be skinny? Well, yes. I want both. But that's where the voters are. And so it's tough to look at. And And I think one of the rubs is that the governor's leaving.
Right.
The legislators are staying.
Right.
Who has to deal with the repercussions of a tax cut when you've got, with tariffs and what's going on federally? You look at the stock market this week. The economic uncertainty. As much as Republicans want to be optimistic, there's a little bit dose of a reality going on. So I think it is tough for them, and I think the governor recognizes that, or his supporters do, and so they're running this campaign ad to say, "Hey, you're Republicans. We elected you to be Republicans and be for lower taxes." But it's tough because they have to govern.
Well, yeah, it's a tight spot to try to move this forward. I do think you have a lot of legislators who are looking at what happens if the economy goes south and we're not producing the revenues that we thought we were going to produce. Nobody wants to go back to the last couple of years of the Mary Fallon days and deal with cutting services and raising taxes so I am sympathetic to that idea. I don't like I'm not a big fan of the way they're proposing to do it. But there's another tax I would rather that they cut first, and the personal income tax, but that's another conversation for another day. So, but yeah, I think you have this tension, right? The governor wants something to hang. This is my legacy. I was able to get us in this direction. Sure. You mentioned competitive. He's competitive too, right? He wants to be remembered in a certain way. And I think he's been frustrated having large Republican majorities and not being able to get this accomplished. I think, I can imagine that being wearing on him a little bit.
We love communication that goes both ways, not just you listening to us pontificate. We would love to hear from our audience. If you have comments, suggestions, or would like to contact us about possibly being a guest on the show, please email notmygeneration@raider.rose.edu.
What else? Let's talk about some national perspectives, especially on Trump. I've seen some polling in different places, and it seems to be all over the place. So I've got the Harris poll put out by Harris and Harvard University. Its results seem relatively positive towards Trump. Sizable majorities in certain areas that supported his agenda, some of the things that he was doing. Pew Research just also released one. It was not nearly as positive. And so how should we think about what voters are thinking about what's going on right now? And is it too early to make that call?
Yeah, I think it is. I think we're in an incredibly tumultuous time with people's attitudes. I mean, there's generally a honeymoon period with a new president, but this isn't really a new president. And so it's a little bit of a unique circumstance in that perspective. But he's also looks like a president that these are things he's wanted to do for 4 years. So he's set on go and moving and folks like that. But, change is change. Exactly. So it causes things to happen. So I think we're going to see polls all over the place here for quite some time until things settle back down, if they do. So I think we're going to see quite a bit of back and forth. Now, I will say in Oklahoma, I have looked at Trump statewide, and his numbers are better here than they have been since January 6th. Okay. They're not quite as good as he was right before the 2020 election, but they are back in that same kind of range. Okay. And there are very few never Trump Republicans in this state anymore.
Right. There are very few never Trump Republicans in Congress anymore either. It seems like they have been pushed out or at least marginalized as much as possible. What's the landscape? What are you looking at? What are things that you think I really want to know what voters think about that might be coming down the pike this next year? What are you interested in?
Well, I mean, what's interesting here on some of the voters is it's really about personalities as much as anything right now. I mean, and it depends if you're talking about state or federal. I'm really interested to see how the long-term DOGE effort works. I think, I've talked to a lot of different folks, and And I think the jury's still out. I mean, it's like, yeah, we don't want government employees here, but we forgot about the munitions plant in McAllister or the weather center, or no, these are things we need. But then there's others that are like, even there, it's like, yeah, but really, if you talk about 600 people at Tinker, it's not that big of a percentage drop, and businesses do this percentage cut all the time, and so I'm anxious to see where that goes. And I mean, I am into biographies, I guess. We mentioned that before. The Elon Musk biography, I read it when it first came out. And, one of his founding principles with Tesla and SpaceX was you cut until you have to add 20% back in. And if you're not adding stuff back in that you cut, you didn't cut enough. And that's the number of bolts in the car, or everything else, all these type of things. And I think that's what we're seeing here. So I don't expect these cuts that are being proposed, like shutting down the Murrah building and these other things. He expects 20% of those not to make it. And if you're not being forced to put those back in, then he doesn't think you cut enough. So it's out of his mindset, I think you have to understand.
It's interesting. Yesterday, Trump, or maybe this morning, I read it this morning, but Trump announced that he's pushing these cuts to the different departments and agencies. So basically saying DOJ was not going to be in charge of terminating, but it would be the cabinet heads would be the one. So I'm wondering if that's already.
It looks like classic good cop, bad cop to me. Right. And I think the public might really, really embrace this. I mean, it might end up being genius at the end of the day. But we'll see what actually happens. But as long as the everyday person doesn't see government not functioning, and the reality is the bar for government functioning for most folks is pretty low.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as long as things are happening, I think you can probably cut quite a bit and look like you're doing things. And it's. I am a data person, a big data person. I like lots of big data, but the reality is most people like anecdotal data.
Sure.
And when you go through, Trump's speech the other day, and he's talking about 10 million for this bizarre activity or 20 million for that, that's what people cling on to. Yep. That there's one person that's 360 years old.
Exactly.
And so he tells a story better than anybody I've ever seen in my political life that gets to that sense of the voter there.
It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I know there has been discussion amongst Republican members of the House regarding the pushback some of them are getting at their town halls.
Yes.
And I found it very interesting that, at least as it was reported, that a consultant that was in that conversation advised them, well, just don't have in-person town halls. And I'm like, that doesn't seem to be the way that maybe this should be handled, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not a member of Congress, and
Well, I think it depends on your district. I really do. I mean, if you're a Republican and your protesters are all on the left, and you're in an R plus 15 seat, why? Except it's just good government and good practice. I mean, we with redistricting, with the partisanship we have. Really, it doesn't matter. You don't have to, like I mentioned before, you don't have to appeal to the full population.
No, not at all.
Our system doesn't encourage that to happen. You just appeal to that extremist group, and you're fine.
Yeah, I think that is very true. And I have told my students, having worked, on a congressional staff before, I'm very aware that the vast majority of communication that occurs is from people who are unhappy with that member of Congress. It's very rare that you get the phone call that says, I'm so glad you did X, right? Voted for that bill or whatever. It's usually, I can't believe you're so stupid and I'm never voting for you again, kind of a...
Yeah, and I would say that 98% of the people that say I'm never voting for you again never voted for you in the first place.
No, I think that's right. Right. Anything else you want to leave us with? Anything that you can think that that people should be watching for over the next year or so?
This is a little bit different here. I need to do some more polling on it here. But one of the things that's happened in Oklahoma is we have this Republican electorate that dictates who wins, and sometimes they get at odds with the general electorate. And so we've seen state questions like Medicaid expansion. We've seen some other things happen. Senate Bill 1027 is going through that would really curtail direct democracy. It would, ban paying for signature gatherers on a per signature basis. It's got lots of other restrictions in there. It would limit how many people from Oklahoma or Tulsa County could sign the petitions, these sort of things. And so I think that's going to be very interesting to watch. Is this how does the political elite try to capture and silence that direct democracy vote that we, it's actually stronger in Oklahoma than it is in other states because of our founding and everything. So even though it's always restricted, 90 days is the shortest window for collecting signatures anywhere in the nation and these type of things. So I think that's something to really watch. And something I'll be watching for on polling here as well to see where people are wanting to engage on those kind of things.
It seems to me that they could run into some issues if they get on that far edge of being way ahead of or way away from where their voters might be. But again, we're talking about districts that by and large have been drawn to ensure that they again only have to appeal to a very highly partisan base, even in their districts, to get elected. How many of them didn't even face opposition in the last general election?
Well, my favorite stat along that line is what we elected 320 or so county offices this last election. Yeah. There was only one election of consequence in November out of those.
Isn't that amazing?
Everything else was decided in the primary. I mean, there no race, only one race decided by less than 10 points in November. Yeah. And we see that with the state legislative races as well.
So at some point there's got to be a break, right? I mean that mechanism of doing things, can it perpetuate? How long can it perpetuate itself? I mean, Democrats had this kind of set up for a long time, right?
Right, and so Republicans ran State Question 640.
Right.
I mean, you had the direct democracy counter to that.
That's right.
And so I think we'll start seeing that kind of movement. And I mean, the last few big state questions, people would say would be left of center ones because, and it makes sense because if they're right of center, they're going to get through the legislative process.
Right. So there is a proposal. We talked about this just a little bit yesterday, but there is a proposal to change the primary system. If we see this in your mind, does that have the potential to break this up a little bit, or?
I think it does. I mean, I think you then can have. I mean, we're conditioned as voters to participate in the November elections,
Right.
and right now they don't matter. And so, by going to an open primary or top two system, which is what's being proposed in Oklahoma, you would have the most voters in the side, and you have to have every elected official speaking to the full electorate instead of just their primary electorate.
Interesting. We've had a couple of guests on who've talked about this thing, and I think we're going to be watching it. I know they're still in the 90-day period right now as far as signature gathering. Is that correct?
We're still in the 90-day period for protesting the filing.
Oh, so they haven't started gathering signatures?
No, correct.
Okay.
And given the recent legislative changes that extended those the protest periods are now twice as long as the time to gather signatures, and so we will. I don't know that they'll be able to start collecting signatures until this fall.
Okay. All right. So we will definitely be watching that, and might probably will have some more conversations about this. I think it's an interesting topic. I do think Oklahoma has very poor voter turnout.
Yeah.
And I think we have a situation where a small sliver of the electorate in a lot of places are determining the outcomes.
No, it's hard to look someone in the eye in Oklahoma if you live outside of about 7 different legislative seats that your vote matters in November.
Uh-huh.
It's hard to fait accompli.
Right. Well, Pat, thank you for joining us today. This has been awesome. Hopefully we will get you back, and especially as campaign 2026 heats up, get some insights on that as well. But thank you very much. And we want to remind our listeners that
democracy is not a spectator sport.
We'll see you next time.
Hey everyone, this is Deborah, the resident Gen Z member of the Not My Generation podcast family. Not My Generation is produced in the Possibilities Inc. studio. This episode was produced by Lauren Peaches Keller. It was edited by Santiago Ramones. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. Send a voice memo to notmygeneration@raider.rose.edu and you could hear your voice on an upcoming episode. If you liked today's episode, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and sharing the podcast with others. You can check out previous episodes on any podcast app and on our podcast website at notmygeneration.captivate.fm, where we also provide our show notes. And remember, you can follow Not My Generation on X, formerly known as Twitter, at NMG Podcast, and on Facebook at Not My Generation Podcast. We look forward to interacting with you soon.